Okay, we are back at it. This is Heinrich Kemmler we're drawing. Moving on to the ink phase here now. And last time we left off, we kind of figured out that we were a little bit too zoomed in when we were doing his lower body part. So it's looking a little small here in comparison to his upper body. So we're going to try to fix that today and then hopefully get through the inking portion. But let's go ahead and dive in. We started to work on his staff too a little bit. I'll kind of pull over some concept reference material we were working with, and we'll go ahead and get this started. I couldn't sleep just knowing that this was messed up, so I just had to get up and get on this ASAP, which is probably a good thing since I'm trying to get back into this. Alright, so what we're going to do here, we're actually going to use a little bit more of the digital art side, which is kind of neat, and we'll be able to then really just take this section here. I'm just going to kind of use this to really isolate this portion of his robe. It's kind of the benefit of digital art. What we're able to do is not have to start from scratch. We can kind of just use these tools to select this and then really just make it bigger. Just like this. Okay, so now that we have that selected, one thing we can do is we can actually edit and we can cut this. And then we can edit and paste it again. This is going to create its own layer here. So this way I can just manipulate this thing on its own. Cool. So let's go ahead and just move this now. We'll select layer 3. Alright, let's bring this down here. Now what we wanted to do is actually zoom out first, just so we can really see how big we need to get this. Okay, so we can make this a little bit bigger now. From here, as I mentioned, see, we can then use this to make this bigger. So I feel like this is, from where it was, this is already looking a little bit better. Now, while we won't get his entire body in there, still be able to trying to get this good lineup. We can, yeah, just go ahead and place this here. So now what we can do is we can drop back into this layer, grab our eraser tool, make this a little bit bigger here, and see how, because we have it on a separate layer now, I'm not going to have to worry about erasing that part. And what we can do is really now just remake these lines as well too. Switch back to our brush, and I think I'm not going to zoom in nearly as much as I was in previous streams, just so that I can make sure that we're getting a good perspective going on. What we can also start doing is when we're done with our reference art, we can kind of, turn off that layer and kind of see how that will look. So, yeah, see, this is already looking better from where it was. Alright, what else do we need to make bigger? So now that we have this isolated, we can also jump back into our secondary layer. And I know just enough about Photoshop to be dangerous, so if I'm missing hotkeys or anything like that, I realize it. Actually, you know what would be kind of cool is maybe if we made, maybe if we made this guy's hand like holding on to his sword. I'll try to get into that a little bit later. But for now, let's just kind of focus on finishing out these lines. Okay. Kind of crease right there. This is where his staff will kind of come up, and that's just going to be a monster in its own. A lot of straight lines with that. If we take a look at some of this art over here, I'll show you what we're looking at for his staff. So this is what we're trying to do with his hand. Of course, this is a screenshot from the game, so you know I figured that while this is supposed to look like he's holding it, he doesn't have a really tight grip on it because this is just the game character. But looks like it's just a piece of wood, and then it kind of has this more lighter color wrapping, and then it kind of gets into this purple side of things. So we'll make sure we want to incorporate that. This as well too, you know, one thing we could do is create another layer and then have that be his staff layer, but again, that gets a little involved. You gotta really just be, and then you really have to get into layer management, which in itself is its own beast. We'll just kind of go ahead here and get started. Again, this is all just about putting lines down, warming up. Knowing that you can always go back. And also with this staff, you know, since this is going to be out in front, it would cover this portion of the skull, right? The skull shoulders. From here, we'll just kind of keep going up. This is one thing we were working on yesterday too, is just this, his staff and how that looks. If we kind of look at this art here, you can kind of see it's actually pretty big. Then with these bat wings coming out, but yeah, looking at this a little bit closer, it's got that wood, and then it looks like it's got some purple wrap around it with it's like almost some little silver charms. We'll get into that detail a little bit later, but for now, let's just go ahead and get this staff laid out. So that's what I'm looking at on my other screen, so that I can follow along. So another thing, you know, looking at this again, this time we're kind of, before we were kind of zooming in a little bit too much, where we were losing track of how big things should be in proportion. So this time we're kind of just going to be a little bit more zoomed out. Part of the reason we were zoomed in was to, you know, make sure that we were able to draw a little bit more accurate. But I've gotten a lot more comfortable with the pen since I just started a couple days ago, so it shouldn't be too big of an issue now here too. And this is again one of the benefits of the digital art side, is I can kind of just manipulate this as it goes without having to redraw the entire thing. Cool. And one thing I know I wanted to fix was definitely going to be this beak here. So for something like this, I will zoom in just a little bit more. I know that generally this is how big I'm going to want the beak, so we can also just do is just, you know, work on just getting that erased. This is kind of a spot that held us up a little bit last time. Cool, and then for here, this is going to also incorporate the bottom part of the beak. We'll definitely want to kind of keep this bottom of the staff line a little bit more pronounced, just to show the distinction of where the staff is in comparison to the actual beak, right? We're going to want to make sure that that's kind of a visually shown. Here it looks like there's going to be kind of like a little crack in the skull. Just include that there. Now let's move on to these bat wings that come out of this bad boy. Cool. That's where we ended up last night. So for this, oops. So here originally we had kind of this angle of the bat wing kind of coming up to this area, but if we look at it, it actually goes up a little bit higher first to begin. So let's go ahead and make sure we do that correctly. So the bat wing, instead of kind of coming up at that angle, it almost curves the opposite direction, almost like this. And from here, it's got this little barb at the end of it. And in this art, I can't really see how it, let's see what I'm looking at here. So see how this kind of curves a little bit. I was coming the other way, but this will curve up. Got that little barb, and then the wingspan comes out. I can really use my reference lines that I had first sketched out to just kind of get a better understanding of how this then will unfold. So I know it's going to come out like this. No, then from there it's going to drop. From there it's going to kind of come into a peak. And then I know, if again looking at this reference, is we're going to want to make sure that we have kind of the fingers 1, 2, 3, and each of those is going to have its own rib, right? So bring that back here. Okay. So what we should start with now is going to be this portion of it, and we don't want to make this the same line of where it starts. We kind of want to show that this is something different, so we'll start it here. Come up nice and easy. You know what? It's actually a little bit thicker. This is the anatomically, you know, this is how it's got to be. Be a little bit thicker here. Then it actually we got one web. You know, really just keeping that those fingers on that undo button. That can be one. And these ones actually come out a little bit further too. So this would be this rib here. A little bit skinnier. These straight lines ain't easy. Cool, and then this comes out like so. It's looking a little funky to me. So let's try to do something like this then. So this comes out a little bit more here, right? We can kind of see if we have a shot of him. See if we can find it. Let's see here. Okay, we'll take a little screenshot of this bad boy. So here's another shot of this, how this kind of breaks out here. So you can see one web, two web, three, and then just how that comes down like this. So we can kind of use this as our reference now. That kind of a better view for us. Pull us onto the other monitor. Okay, so judging by this now, looks like this comes out a little bit more like so. Okay. And then we'll have one peak. Looks like a smaller one here. So this then means that this one comes out like this. And you know what? We'll just clean up this canvas part right here before we just start making a bunch of lines intersecting themselves. Kind of try to keep it clean and avoid confusing the eye when you're trying to fill this in. Okay, let's go ahead and redo this one here. Okay, and then this one. It'll be its own line here. Cool. Okay, and then this one is going to be a little bit bigger of a bridge here. It's not more of a defined web there. Cool. Then here, it's going to be 1, 2, 3. It actually might be a little short on the fingers, but you know, it's fan art. I can make this how I want it. Who's really keeping track? Actually, what we'll do is I think we'll pull up this other drawing here. So now I'm back to looking at this one. And one main bridge, 2, 3, 4, then 5 is this core. So right now we're working with, got that one, 1, 2, 3. So I almost feel like I need another one in between this area to really make this make sense. So let's go ahead and get that one in there. With that, we can kind of come up from here. Just connect this. Cool. That's that. 1. 2. Kind of bring this out a little bit more to give this a little bit more space. We're getting a little line happy. We'll clean this up later, but let's go ahead and just zoom out and make sure that we're keeping our, we don't want this wing to be too big in comparison to everything else. Yeah, we can kind of see that that's looking pretty decent. Okay, let's go ahead and now finish up this wing. Now, perspective-wise, this is kind of tilted a little bit away from us, so it won't necessarily be an exact duplicate of this other side. So we'll kind of come up like this, make that peak there. Then instead of coming out super far, we're actually just going to kind of make this drop down a little bit more. That way it looks like it's really turned, right? We know that this is going to be essentially one of the, similar to this other side, there's going to be these more finger parts of the wings coming down. Kind of get this included here. Get this kind of rock in there. And then really just bring this up like this. So one thing we'll want to do as far as symmetry goes, right, is we'll try to want to make these 2 points where these meet similar. So we'll just kind of bring that up just like I think that'll be good for now. All right, that looks like some bat wings on a skull. And here I can already see this is looking a little funky to me, this line. A lot of this is just about, what you feel looks good. So I'm going to bring this down even tighter here. All about that feeling. Okay, I can kind of get in here and zoom in a little bit more now, clean up some of these lines. We won't spend too much time on this, but definitely going to want to just kind of get this cleaned up a little bit more than it is. Get up here. Yeah, we really did some damage up here, so we'll make our eraser even smaller. Either do that or zoom in more, whatever you prefer. Just kind of keep it zoomed out. Let me make sure that this kind of connects here. Then, since we did bring this out a little bit more, what we'll probably want to do is go ahead and erase this line as well too. Just bring this up a little bit better. Alright, so we're at the 20-minute mark so far. We're making a lot of good progress. I don't know if we'll get a chance. I really am excited to get into the coloring side of it, but definitely don't want to rush this crucial point of really making these hard lines either. Okay. And another thing as well too, there's going to be so much going on in this sketch or whatever you want to call it that no one's really going to notice if these wings are looking a little funky. We might even end up just kind of cutting this guy out if necessary. Cool. But let's go ahead and move now into what the next part of his staff looks like. And we will use this as reference. So it looks like it's just going to be wood. Again, yesterday we saw that this was where the wood was kind of coming out of the eyeball, so how this skull is attached would make sense. One thing we might want to do at this point too is also just kind of make this line here and kind of see it really makes that beak distinguish as far as what's the top versus what's the bottom. And then yeah, let's go ahead and get into that. Okay, so that line, then probably start something like got this little curve here as well too to kind of just show this beak will be the end of me. These hands will be the end of me. I'm avoiding the hands if you can't tell. Okay, so this will be wood, and then we kind of have a little, so where that felt comes in. We'll want to kind of make this line extend out further than the wood just to show that it is, you know, wrapping around it. Then he looks like he has some, that's just some patterns here. And then he actually has some little like silver jangles on here. So we'll just kind of get those in. These will really start playing an important role when we get into coloring. Okay, and one thing we'll want to see is just kind of this cloth comes down like this. Again, just making sure that you can kind of make this line here, making that it's a distinctive from the wood. And here I can already tell that we're going to want to clean up this staff a little bit more as well. Really, this is what a lot of the concept or the reference lines this layer would be used for. So you're not having to make all these additional adjustments at this stage, but you know, you live and you learn. Okay. So this is where the restaurant here, this will actually be wood when we color it in, which will really be, it's going to make it look real nice. So it'll show that this kind of cloth's wrapped around a little bit more. Okay, now let's go ahead and, looks like this comes down maybe to, maybe a little bit. We'll make sure that this is wood, and then it actually has this cloth piece here that is going to be tan or a different color. This won't be purple. But this then goes all the way down to about here. So here's what I'm looking at. So we got kind of the cloth wrap around. We got those little, you know, silver jingles that we're calling them. And now this is going to be that wood again, and then this lighter part, and then that dark wood again. Then we get to his hand. So let's go ahead and get into it. Okay. And for here at this point, I know that this skull is going bye-bye. At least this nose part of it, which is fine. I don't mind not having to include that. And when we take this way, we can really start seeing how that creates a lot of depth as well too. We want to kind of show that this staff is out in front of him. Cool. And with this staff, it's going to have kind of a wrapper effect as well too. So really important as well where we make these lines. See, if I make it like this, then it's going to make it seem like this is somehow connected. So we just want to make sure that maybe this falls in between. And then let's see, let's make one more here. Okay. And for this one, we might actually kind of follow this wrap line too and have this be a little bit more lined off. Okay. And then one thing I noticed I did want to fix yesterday was going to be how fat his face kind of comes out on this side. I'm going to thin him up just a little bit more here. And that's just going to be done by doing this. There's still some things we need to do on this cat, like, you know, getting kind of these little frays in his hat a little bit more. But these are all details that'll come kind of at the final stage. Okay. Cool. So I think one thing we can do now is, once we have these initial hard lines down to, I'll finish his little sword. Okay. And now what we can do is, because we moved these layers, we can now merge these two. You typically don't want to do this until like the end, but we're just going to go ahead and merge these layers since I'm happy with how this turned out. And then from there, now that they're merged, it's like we're drawing on both of them instead of the layers. So we'll go ahead and kind of just reconnect this now where it needs to be and erase everything that doesn't. So for example, we'll connect these again. Connect these here. Okay. Nice. I think this is going to be fine as far as size of the hands go. I think what I also want to do is make this come down a little bit more, right? We don't need to try to include his hand if it doesn't really make sense. just go ahead and erase this portion here. You know, make sure it doesn't have too stubby arms. I do want to include a little bit of his hand here, because when we get to the coloring stage, just a little bit of you know, skin color against where this will be purple and black. That'll make it really kind of pop a little bit more too. So we definitely want to keep that in there somehow. Okay, let's go ahead and finish up his sleeve here. While we're avoiding working on his hand, we'll just kind of work around it. And that's part of it too. If you find yourself getting, you know, caught up, spending too much time on one part of it, just always come back to it. Let's kind of make that a little bit around here. And then what we'll do is, you know, this is ultimately when we color this in, this is going to be a little bit more blacked out, so we won't have to deal with this too much. I think one thing I know that we'll want to do is just bring this so it doesn't come out so much. You know, it's just going to kind of look awkward of his arm if it kind of fans out that much. And we can kind of just wait to do this guy's hand a little bit later on. Leave it till the end. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and just kind of get a quick zoom out right about that 30-minute mark. Just kind of making sure that everything's looking... Yeah, see how small this thing was in comparison to where it turned into now. Face is looking a little bit more skinny. You can even see how some of these little notches in his hat are really starting to add some character to it. Cool. Yep, and you know, as I mentioned, like, you know, there's so much going on in this that, like, even focusing on the hands is like, I'm not too concerned about it. But they must get done. So for this, I know this is going to be the general size, so I'm just going to get I'm going to get a big zoom in here just to really make this happen. Here's the reference I'm using. If we kind of zoom in here, we'll see, you know, kind of flat comes out. Then these, you know, fingers are consecutively smaller. These two are pretty even. And then this actually is where his thumb is. So I'm trying to figure, he's holding his staff like this, like, I feel like you would only see this part of his knuckles, instead of, like, this almost looks like his fingertips for here too. So it's hard to kind of use this reference, so sometimes I'll just even look at my hand, my own hand, as if I was holding that staff. But let's go ahead and just, you know, erase some of this. Oops. That was definitely not the eraser. This is where I was getting a little triggered last night when I was drawing, so it's kind of a little messy here. But, you know, that's why we kind of just take a step back and, you know, come back to it. You can always come back to it. Alright, so one thing that will also help distinguish these fingers is kind of starting these lines here a little bit further out, right? And you can kind of see where these knuckles are and use that as your reference. This guy's going to kind of come up a little bit more. Again, just keeping that other hand on the Control Delete. And actually, we'll want to make this a little bit smaller here. Not too skinny though. And then this is going to be his pinky. You can kind of just bring out like so. Bring out like so. And then actually, you know, if we can see a little bit here, because of now how this is looking, we could then see how this kind of would curve up a little bit more. This kind of curves up a little bit here. And we can start erasing these other lines that are just kind of getting in our way now. And now we can even just kind of tell cosmetically that we want this finger to kind of come up a little bit more, right? Like instead of, you can even see it in here, even though this is from the game, like it does kind of come up a little bit and then drives down instead of just this slope that I have currently. So kind of be able to tell like what looks right and what doesn't. Okay. So this knuckle's going to kind of come up a little. I'm going to come up a little bit more here. Still kind of keep this round shape. This is where it's going to come in a little bit more like that, right? Come up. Cool. All right. Not too bad. Just kind of make sure, know that this part of it is going to kind of come up a little bit more too. Something like that. But let's do the ultimate test and get a zoom out. See how that's looking. Just kind of finish up connecting his staff here. Here where he's holding it. And then actually looks like this line comes out a little bit further. So we'll go ahead and just erase these. Okay. So right now the line we're working with here is going to be this. See how it kind of comes up a little bit rounder. So I had a little bit cutting too much in. And then one thing we might want to try to incorporate is also just this part of the palm right here, right? So we might even bring these fingers in a little bit closer. Okay, let's get to it. So I think what I'll do is I'll bring this finger up here, this finger up here. It's kind of chipping away. And then this can kind of be his palm that we'll have like this, right? Now watch when we then close this up here. When we start erasing this, again be his palm. Erase this here. So zoomed in, it's looking a little funky with this hand, but when we get a zoom out, hopefully, there's not so much attention brought to it that, there'll be so much going on. And for this line, this is the one that will be a little bit more of like down this way, a little bit more. And this sleeve, actually, we can kind of come up here just to really fill in this gap here. What we'll do at this point is we'll just zoom out again. Don't get too close to the project. Gotta zoom out just to make sure the sleeve's not looking funky. Yeah, see, so here we go. You can kind of now see where this natural line would kind of come out there. All right. Yeah, see, that's not too bad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Definitely want to count your fingers. Definitely want to make sure that you're all accounted for. You see here, now I can even see that this would probably come in a little bit more here. That would drop this finger back here and here. And one thing we can also do is, start putting these lines. Kind of helps. Kind of shows that grip. And then one of the important parts is kind of just making this little, just that little erase there really kind of shows that that hand wraps around and is gripping. Okay. And kind of get this line here to complete this. Connect that there. All right, y'all. This is kind of, it's kind of all coming together now. We might be ready to get some color in here. At least get a little start. That is gonna be its own mission. Not really sure how this hat connects to this neck. Maybe something like that. Alright, y'all. So here's the test. We'll go ahead and just remove this sketch layer. So you can kind of see if we're missing anything. One thing we might want to think about doing is, kind of following this line here for the sleeve. Kind of having this come out like so. Alright. So we could probably leave that other layer fully hidden now, which is great. It kind of just cleans up the canvas a little bit. Here we'll want to make sure that now I know that this line is going to be erased. This line is going to be erased. Then we can even kind of just get back in here now and just kind of clean these parts up a little bit better. Kind of make this come out here. Connect this line here. All right, let's do it. Okay, so getting into the coloring side now, we're just gonna see if we can even just get a little start on this. Here's what we're using. So coloring's probably, digital coloring's a little weak in that area, so I'm just gonna kind of do this how I usually do, and we're just gonna have fun with it. All right. So the way I do the coloring now is by actually using this magic wand tool, and then I'll select the area I want to color. I'll make sure that this tolerance is kind of put up a little high because this is all black and white, so just want to make sure that I'm getting all the things. So we might even just put this at 255. Cool. So now that I have this selected, what I'll do is I will then get into my brush. We will then get into our color picker, and we'll start kind of finding a nice little peach. This guy's, he's a little old, so maybe get a little bit more color like this in here. This might be a good place to start. So now what I can do is I can make this brush a lot bigger, and what you can see is now when I color this in, it's only going to color in that selected area, right? So this just makes things a lot easier to isolate and not make sure you're not bleeding into this. I think you hold in Shift, and then I can select these other parts. And at this point as well too, you know, I don't really have to worry about perspective, so I can really just kind of get in here and start isolating this part out. One thing you have to be careful of though is because you have such a some of these grays and stuff that are getting picked up, you might have to start, you know, dropping this tolerance a little bit more. You can hold in shift, and that will make sure that you're selecting other things like that. And also what you can do is what you can also do at this point, and maybe one thing we should have done previously, is let's actually go ahead and do that. We will go back to here, and we will then select all this. So this is where the layering gets really important. Let's see if we can then just do this. That's what we want to do. So we'll actually want to duplicate this line layer first real quick. And the reason we do that, we're just going to restart from the top. Okay. So what we'll want to do is duplicate this layer. And another thing about layer structure is just to make sure you're naming these. So this will be, we'll just call this top line. This one will be bottom line. This one we could just call sketch layer. Okay. So the reason why we do this now is, so even though these are the same, what this does is this allows us then to, when we do get into the painting portion of it, and say we're painting, we might even just duplicate this one more time. One thing that you can also see is this is also helping make these lines a little bit darker too, a little bit more thick, which is always going to be a good thing. You see how it kind of progressively gets a little bit lighter each time. So as you duplicate more, it's just one way to make sure your lines stay thick. Okay, so as mentioned, the reason why we do this is now, say we go to this bottom line, and we select here, and then we go ahead and get our paint in. And now when we start doing this, deselect. Now, the reason we do this now is because now on this layer, I can even get in here. I can zoom in a little bit more. Change this brush size. Now watch, I can kind of get in there a little bit more without covering this black line, because I have the layer above it that is actually acting as the hard line. So this way I don't have to really rely too much on that other tool, but it still does the trick. And since we always have these lines layers isolated, we can then, even if I go over this, we can always just reduplicate it and be saved. Cool. So I think for now I just kind of want to get started on his face, and I feel like, you know, what I would ultimately do then is I would probably make another layer, another color layer. So we'll actually then call this, rename this as color base, and then I would basically create another layer out of here. And then I would say like maybe color, maybe name this like color to darkening. Again, there's probably easier ways to do this, but I'm not really too trained on this program. I'm then going to select this, and I'm going to just drop it down a little bit lower here in the color scheme, so this brown is going to be good. And then from here, I'm going to switch this to multiply. So now what I do, so you can kind of see this guy's got some, and at this point I could probably zoom out a little bit too. This guy's got a little, it got some dark eyes going on. So here I can kind of now start using this to get in here, and you can see as I darken it out a little bit since it's multiplying. Whenever I re-go over this same line, it's going to make it a little darker. But this is just a way to kind of then put some of those darker colors in there. Some of these shadows. And with that too, you can see how that works with the hard lines. And you know, even from there, you can kind of just, get into this a little bit more. And you know, one thing you can do with this is where you get into, you know, putting a little bit more gray in his. You can kind of just build this out a little bit more, put a little bit more of that color in there. Okay. Kind of do things like this, like make this little bit, and then I'm definitely up in here. I want to kind of bridge these kind of brows out a little bit more. And he's old, so he's got some lines here, you know. Kind of keep doing these kind of cheekbones. Really using this as your way to put some depth into it, which you weren't really able to achieve from before. From here you can kind of, you know, make sure that he's got his little chin. You don't really have to do too much on his lips here, but you know, you can kind of do some initial just line here. Cool. Alright, we're reaching that 53-minute point, so I'm glad we're getting into the color side of things now. But, you know, when you zoom out a little bit, it's going to kind of see how this will start looking a little bit more. You can kind of see where you need to might lighten it up a little bit as well, too. But let's go ahead and kind of just start working on his beard a little bit more. So again, I'll kind of get the color swatch, and for this, I won't go entirely too black because I want it to be a little bit more grayed out. And then one thing with this color base, say if you think it's a little bit too dark, you can always just light that by doing the opacity, right? Okay, so here, let's see, this guy's definitely got, you want to have this color base area. It's a little, it's got kind of these like really pronounced beard lines here. Kind of get this little chin a little bit more now. Might even want to make this opacity on the actual brushes a little bit lighter. So I might end up kind of redoing this part, but see how we'll kind of build this beard in. And I don't know if we want to just kind of make sure we get each strand going. I don't know if how that'll look, but you know, we can kind of try. Again, just kind of using this multiply idea to really just highlight some of the more focal areas. He's got some, we kind of look at he's got these parts here, a little darker around the brim, and he's kind of got his goatee rocking as well too, so we'll want to make sure that that's kind of captured. But I feel like even this up here is a little bit too dark. But now as we keep going in, it's almost like we'll have each individual kind of fill up all this white space here. Also, you know, he's got all of this going on. So I know that I'm going to want to make this a little bit darker here. But this is going to be the man's hair. So we can have a little bit of fun here. I kind of like to always just do a nice complementary hard line on the outside so it's not just like ends in black. And we'll just want to make sure, since this is his hair, that it kind of all flows nicely and in the same direction here, really. Okay. He does kind of have some particular spots in here. And even at this point too, you can really get a nice zoom out and just kind of have fun with it, because it's just going to be his hair, right? Kind of allows you to make even longer strands, so that might actually be the call. Again, following these lines, you'll kind of want to have these lines a little bit separate from how his beard is. Maybe look, show a little bit more distinction there. It's going to be kind of more darker over in this area, whereas there's that more shadowed out. Keep that there. Kind of just kind of wrap up by getting his eyebrows in here as well too. Cool. Really, we might want to save some of this more darkening for the darkening layer, right? Make sure we're just working in the right layers. But all right. Okay, I think that's gonna wrap it for today. We put in some good time on this. We got them through the hard ink line layer. Got a staff rocking. I'm pretty happy with that hand for now. We might go back and fix that, but you know, this is gonna be kind of where the fun starts. We'll start getting some black in there, some of the purples, and really just building this out. So we're gonna call it. Thanks for joining in. Smash that subscribe button, and we will see you back here next time when we get into more of the coloring. Thanks for watching. See ya.